Texas, 1944. The sun had barely risen when the trucks rumbled through the dust outside Amarillo. Engines sputtered and fell silent, leaving only the sound of cicadas and a faint wind whispering through mesquite trees. Inside one of the trucks sat a group of German prisoners, not soldiers, but women. Their khaki uniforms were wrinkled, their eyes hollow from weeks of transport across oceans and borders. Among them, 24-year-old Lisa Lotta Minhart, a former Luftwaffe radio operator captured near Cherbourg. She had imagined America as a cage of steel and fire. Every rumor back home said the same, that captured Germans would be beaten, humiliated, or buried beneath the desert sun. The truck doors swung open. Lisa braced for shouting, for the crack of a rifle butt, but instead came a calm, measured voice. "Ma'am, watch your step." A man in a tan hat stood waiting, sleeves rolled up, dust on his boots. He wasn't a soldier. He looked like a man from the Western films she'd once watched before the war. A cowboy. Behind him stretched a sky so vast it seemed unreal, blue to the edge of the earth. Lisa blinked in confusion. The air smelled of horses and hay, not gunpowder. Around her, the other women climbed down hesitantly, clutching their small bags. There were no chains, no shouting, just a few soldiers leaning on rifles, watching without anger. The cowboy handed her a tin cup of water. It was cold, cleaner than anything she'd tasted since France. She drank it all at once. "Plenty more where that came from," he said. Back home, they had been told Americans were savages, a nation of criminals and factory slaves who lived for money and machines. Yet here, in the soft heat of a Texas morning, she saw something that didn't fit the stories. Cattle moved lazily beyond the fences. Windmills turned in the distance. A dog barked at its shadow. "You'll be helping out here," the man said. "Feeding, cleaning, riding if you're up for it." Riding? She almost laughed. She had expected shackles, not saddles. When the camp gates closed behind them, Lisa looked back at the open plains. For the first time since capture, she felt something unfamiliar. Curiosity. She whispered to herself, half in disbelief, This is America." The narrator's voice cuts in. She had been taught to fear a monster. Instead, she found a nation so confident it didn't need to hate its enemies. A land where prisoners were given horses, not chains. Before she ever saw Texas, Lisa Lotta had been certain she would die in America. Every German she knew believed it. The Reich's propaganda had made sure of that. Posters warned that captured soldiers would be tortured or used for experiments. Radio broadcasts painted America as corrupt, a land where democracy had rotted into greed. For women like Lisa, the fear was sharper. Rumors whispered through the Luftwaffe's auxiliary corps that female prisoners were sent to labor camps, or worse. Those stories followed her through the long journey west, through the dark holds of Liberty ships, across endless railways that cut the plains. But when the doors opened in Texas, the nightmare never came. The guards offered food. They said please and thank you. It felt so unnatural, she thought it must be a trick. But it wasn't. The United States had something the Reich never understood: moral confidence. By 1944, America held more than 400,000 captured Axis soldiers and civilians on its soil. But instead of punishing them, the U.S. Army followed the Geneva Conventions with meticulous care. Prisoners earned small wages, wrote letters, attended church, even learned English. In Texas, with its endless land and labor shortages, they worked on farms and ranches instead of behind barbed wire. It wasn't sentiment, it was logic. With millions of men overseas, crops still needed planting, cattle needed tending, and cotton needed harvesting. German POWs filled the gap. But to Lisa and the others, this practicality looked like compassion. That first night, she stared at her dinner: beef stew, bread, butter, and a slice of apple pie. She thought it was a test. Some whispered the food was poisoned. By morning, hunger won. They ate and realized the enemy they'd been taught to despise fed them better than their own army ever had. In one of her first censored letters home, Lisa wrote, "They told us we would be slaves, but here even the guards say good morning. The sky is enormous, and the food tastes of mercy." For German women raised under dictatorship, the greatest shock wasn't comfort, it was dignity. America didn't need cruelty to prove its strength. That quiet confidence began to dismantle everything they had believed. By spring 1944, the U.S. had become the world's largest keeper of prisoners. Over 400,000 Axis captives, Germans, Italians, Japanese, were processed and assigned to labor. Texas alone held more than 70 major camps, built in months, identical in design. Rows of wooden barracks, mess halls, workshops, and parade grounds. What made them remarkable wasn't the look. It was the idea behind them. Unlike Axis camps built to break spirits, American POW camps aimed to control morale through order and fairness. A well-fed, busy prisoner caused fewer problems, required fewer guards, and became, in time, a quiet messenger of American strength. Each camp was a small city: libraries with English and German books, infirmaries with running water, workshops, even orchestras and theater troupes. To outsiders, it seemed indulgent. To the War Department, it was psychological warfare, kindness as strategy. When captured German women arrived in 1944, mostly nurses, clerks, and radio operators, the question arose where to keep them. The answer was Texas. Its open land and agricultural needs made it ideal for experimental labor programs that included women. Many came through Camp Hearn or Camp Swift, surrounded by wheat fields and mesquite. The rules were simple: obey, work, and be treated fairly. Soon the women were assigned across the plains. Some harvested cotton, others milked cows or mended gear. Many worked on ranches, tending livestock alongside Americans who trusted them with tools, horses, even freedom of movement. For the prisoners, it was unimaginable. For ranchers, it was common sense. There simply weren't enough hands left at home. To the German women, this trust was revelation. Propaganda had painted Americans as degenerate. Yet here was discipline, routine, and kindness. Even the meals astonished them: 3,200 calories a day, more than many civilians. Bread, beef, potatoes. Enough to live, enough to think. Vegetables, and even coffee or fruit when available, astonished the German POWs who were used to ration cards and thin soup. It felt like abundance beyond reason. Everything in the American system ran on logistics, from the trains that hauled supplies to the trucks that collected laundry. The same industry that built tanks and bombers also fed its prisoners. To Lieselot Minhart, the lesson was clear. Power wasn't just measured by armies, but by organization. In her diary, she wrote, "Every crate, every meal, every uniform fits into a plan. Nothing is wasted. They build everything like a machine that never sleeps." She would soon see that machine up close on the ranches, where it merged with something even more bewildering: the effortless generosity of ordinary Americans. The morning the trucks arrived, the air smelled of hay and dust. The Texas sun was still low, painting gold across the horizon, as guards called the women's names from a clipboard. Lieselotte stood among 24 others, her uniform faded but neat, waiting to be assigned to a nearby cattle ranch. They had imagined the worst: chains, back-breaking labor, harsh commands. For months, rumors had spread through the barracks of prisoners sent into the desert, never to return. But when the trucks stopped at the camp gates, what they saw left them speechless. Instead of soldiers and dogs, there were men in wide-brimmed hats and denim shirts, leaning casually against pickup trucks. Cowboys, real ones. Their leader, a tall rancher named Frank Callahan, greeted them with a grin. "Morning, ladies. You all ready to work?" His accent was thick, his manner easy. The interpreter had to repeat his words twice before they understood. When they reached the Callahan ranch, the shock deepened. No barbed wire fences, only open fields stretching to the horizon, dotted with cattle and horses under a blazing sky. Frank's first order wasn't punishment, but breakfast. Bacon crackled in skillets. Biscuits, eggs, and coffee filled the air with warmth. The women sat in silence, bewildered, as they were served at a long wooden table. No guards stood over them, no shouting, only laughter. After breakfast came a new surprise. Frank led them to a corral where saddled horses waited. "You'll be learning to ride," he said. "Can't herd cattle on foot. We've got work to do next week." The women laughed nervously. Lisa whispered, "He's joking." But he wasn't. Ranch hands began pairing each woman with a horse, offering patient instruction in broken German and pantomime. Chaos followed. Skirts tangled, saddles slipped, and startled horses spun in circles. But the cowboys only laughed warmly, helping them back up. "Don't fight her," one drawled. "Feel her rhythm. She'll carry you if you trust her." By noon, the women were covered in dust and sweat. But they were laughing. The fear that had ruled them for months melted beneath the Texas sun. For the first time since capture, they were outside the wire without guards. When Lisa finally guided her horse at a trot, she felt something she hadn't known in years. Freedom, not political, but personal. The rhythm of hooves, the rush of wind, the promise of movement. That night, in the bunkhouse built for workers, she wrote, "They trust us. It is madness, perhaps kindness disguised as madness. They treat us not as enemies, but as people. I do not understand this America." Her confusion was shared by everyone. They had been raised to believe strength came from domination. Here, it came from calm confidence and patience. Even authority looked different. The cowboys didn't rule by fear. When a horse balked, they didn't whip it. They waited, coaxed, and tried again. Leadership, Lisa realized, could come from respect instead of obedience. If this was the nation they had fought against, then everything she'd been told was a lie. The change came quietly. Within days, the German women were treated less like prisoners and more like ranch hands. Their only boundaries were the open plains, the mesquite wind, and the cowboys' steady watchfulness. Frank put it plainly. "You run, you'll die thirsty. You stay, you'll eat well, and sleep easy. We're not your jailers. We're your neighbors till this war's done." At first, no one believed him. But after a week, the truth became clear. The supply trucks came only once a week, and no one counted heads. The women could have vanished into the desert, but none did. Why would they? Here, they worked, laughed, and learned. They mended fences, milked cows, and stacked hay with the precision of factory hands. "Tougher than half the boys we've hired," one cowboy remarked. "And they don't complain, neither." Lisa noticed something else: the way Americans valued work. In Germany, labor was duty. Here, it was pride. The cowboys joked, sang, and turned every chore into a challenge. Who could rope faster, mend quicker, haul more before sunset? Evenings brought another surprise. Instead of being locked away, the women sat by the fire where harmonicas and guitars turned dusk into music. At first, they stayed apart, unsure, but slowly, the songs bridged the silence. One night, when a cowboy hummed Lily Marlene, Lisa joined in before realizing it. English and German voices mingled, the fire flickered, and for a few moments there were no enemies, only people sharing the same stars. Frank leaned back and said softly, "War ends sooner when folks realize they were never that different." From then on, work felt lighter. Barriers fell away. One woman, Anna, asked to learn the lasso, and soon laughter filled the fields as she practiced. But the true bond came one afternoon when a storm tore across the plains. The sky turned black, lightning split the air, and cattle panicked. Without hesitation, the women rode into the rain beside the cowboys, shouting, driving the herd back through the mud. Hours later, soaked and exhausted, they returned together, every animal safe. Frank grinned. "Guess y'all ain't just city girls after all." That night, the ranch hands hung a wooden sign over the bunkhouse door. "The German Cowgirls." Lisa laughed until tears came. Somewhere inside her, a shift had taken root. The war, the fear, the propaganda. It all felt distant now. What mattered was work, survival, and the rare grace of being trusted. By early autumn, the air cooled across the Texas plains, and so too did the walls around their hearts. The war still raged across Europe, but here time felt slower. Days filled with honest labor, nights with laughter and the hum of crickets. For the first time since capture, mail was allowed. Each woman was handed a single sheet of official stationery and told she could write one letter home. The pages would be censored, of course, but even within limits, it was a rare chance to speak to the world they'd left behind. That night, the bunkhouse fell silent, except for the scratch of pencils on paper. Lisa's hand trembled as she began, "Dearest Mother, I am alive, and I must tell you something you will not believe. I am working on a farm in Texas. They call it a ranch. The people here are kind. Yes, truly kind. They give us food, so much I can hardly finish it. They even let us ride horses. The men wear hats as wide as dishes and drink something called Coca-Cola. They play music after work and teach us their songs." She paused, staring at the lines. Would her mother think she had gone mad? Propaganda at home had painted American camps as brutal places where prisoners were starved and beaten. Yet in this sunburned paradise, she drank coffee each morning and was learning to make chili. She continued, "Mama, they trust us. We could run, but we do not, because we are free in all the ways that matter. I never thought freedom could look like this." The letters were collected the next morning. Weeks later, replies arrived, carefully censored, trembling with disbelief. "Lisa, are you sure? You must be mistaken. Perhaps you are dreaming? They would never treat prisoners so well." Her mother was not alone. Other women received similar doubts. To families enduring raids and ration cards, tales of hamburgers, open fields, and friendly cowboys sounded like fantasy. Even the American officers who reviewed the mail were amused. "Y'all are writing fairy tales," one chuckled. "Ain't nobody going to believe you over there." But the reality was undeniable. Each day the German prisoners rode deeper into an America that defied everything they'd been taught. They saw it in the abundance: eggs by the dozen, meat by the pound, sugar by the sack. They saw it in the machines, tractors roaring across fields on gasoline that seemed endless. They saw it in the attitude: no bowing, no rigid hierarchy, no fear. When Lisa asked a cowboy why he treated them kindly, he shrugged. "Lady, war's over for you when you get here." Ain't no use fighting ghosts. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but a pragmatic mercy that measured worth by work, not by flag. One afternoon, a new group arrived, male prisoners from another camp. They watched in disbelief as the women led horses from the barn, laughing with the ranch hands. "This cannot be real," one muttered in German. But it was. Seeing their comrades ride unchained across open pasture-cracked years of conditioning. As the men joined the crews, they too began to soften. Cowboys taught them to mend fences, throw ropes, even dance. By November, the Callahan Ranch had become something impossible, a small corner of reconciliation in a world still burning. For Lisa, it was the start of a quiet revelation, that humanity could survive even in captivity, that kindness could rise from the ruins. She did not yet know these lessons would follow her home and reshape everything she believed. April 1945. The wind carried the scent of rain and young grass. Calves bawled in the pastures, fields greened again, and rumors spun faster than the dust devils. Germany collapsing, Berlin surrounded. Hitler dead, some said. Others called it lies. At the ranch, the women worked as usual, mending tack, washing clothes, herding cattle. Yet tension thrummed in the air. The radio in Frank's kitchen, usually set to country music and baseball, now offered nothing but Europe. That afternoon, he stepped into the barn, solemn, hat in one hand, a folded newspaper in the other. "Ladies," he said softly, "it's over." For a long moment no one spoke. The word hung like thunder that hadn't broken. "Over?" Lisa whispered. "The war?" "Germany surrendered," Frank said. Tools dropped. Anna covered her mouth and wept. Lisa stared at the floor, blank. For years, every breath, fear, and loss had been tied to the war. Now it was gone. No one cheered. There was no celebration, only stunned silence and the distant lowing of cattle. That night they gathered by the fire, faces lit by flickering orange, unsure whether to feel relief or grief. Frank poured coffee and said quietly, "It's done now. You all can go home soon." The word home struck harder than the news. What did it mean anymore? Towns might be gone, families scattered or dead. Germany was rubble. Lisa sipped her coffee and watched sparks drift into the dark. "What will we go back to?" she murmured. Frank didn't answer. He didn't need to. In the days that followed, army officers arrived to process repatriation. Trucks came to carry them back to official camps to await ships bound for Europe. The cowboys stood by as the women packed their few belongings, clothes, letters, keepsakes. Frank found Lisa folding her work gloves into a canvas bag. "Reckon you'll be going home soon?" he asked gently. She nodded, throat tight. "Thank you, Mr. Callahan." "For everything." He smiled beneath the brim. "Ain't nothing to thank me for. You worked hard, earned your keep. That's all any of us can do." Then, with a playful glint, he held out a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. "Got something for you." Inside lay a brand-new Stetson, cream-colored and soft. "So you don't forget Texas." Lisa laughed through tears and set it on her head, the brim shading her eyes. The ranch hands whooped. Someone shouted, "Yee-haw!" The German cowgirl rides again. When the trucks finally rolled out, the women looked back through the slats to see barns, windmill, and men waving hats in farewell. For Lisa, that sight would never fade. It wasn't merely a place, it was a revelation. She had come to Texas a prisoner and was leaving as something else. Someone who had glimpsed a different way to live, where dignity came not from rank or fear, but from respect. As the truck rattled down the dusty road, she whispered, "Maybe we lost the war, but perhaps we can still win peace. Watching the wide horizon disappear, she understood the greatest freedom she'd found wasn't physical, it was moral. She had seen the power of kindness, and it had changed her forever. The journey home took months. The war was done, but the ocean was slow and bureaucracy slower. When her ship finally reached Bremerhaven, winter had returned, cold, gray, broken. The docks were ruins, the city flattened, streets turned to rivers of rubble. As the women stepped ashore, their breath fogged in the frigid air. This was homecoming, to a homeland barely standing. American officers handed out small care packages, chocolate bars, canned goods, letters with directions. The Red Cross emblem on every box felt surreal and humbling. For years they had been told Americans were materialistic, cruel, without honor. Yet now, holding a Hershey bar and wearing a Texas hat, Lisa felt the last of that lie crumble. In her hometown, the war's verdict was clear. The house, gone. Parents, gone. Village, burned. But amid the ashes she carried something no ruin could erase, an idea learned under the Texas sun. She took work as a translator for the occupation forces. Her English, picked up from Cowboys, was rough and slangy, but it drew smiles. She called officers partner and said ain't, and told stories of wide skies and men who treated prisoners like people. Many soldiers were astonished. They expected tales of cruelty, not cattle drives, Coca-Cola, and borrowed Stetsons. In 1948, she spoke at a post-war women's conference in Stuttgart on rebuilding through understanding. "I was a prisoner of war," she began softly, "but I never felt like one." She spoke of shared food, of Frank Callahan's quiet dignity, of the day she first wore a Stetson and felt, perhaps for the first time, equal. "I learned that freedom is not given by nations," she said. "It is given by people, one act of kindness at a time." The audience wept. When she finished, an American woman embraced her. It was the first time many there had seen such a thing. One-time enemies, now sisters. Years later, Lisa immigrated to the United States, settling in San Antonio, not far from the ranch where she had once worked. She opened a bakery, blending German pastries with Southern flavors, apple strudel with pecan crumble, pretzels dusted with smoked salt. Above the counter hung a photo of a young woman in 1945, a cowboy hat too big for her head, standing beside a tall rancher with a shy smile. Beneath it, a simple inscription, "From enemies to friends." When asked, she would say, "That's the man who taught me what America really is." By the time she passed in 1987, she had become a local symbol of reconciliation. Former prisoners, men and women, visited her shop, trading memories of war and the unlikely kindness they had found. Historians now say these prisoner experiences helped shape post-war ties between Germany and the United States. Thousands returned home with stories of fairness, decency, and compassion, becoming the first human bridges in a world desperate to rebuild trust. In the end, it wasn't treaties or governments that began the healing. It was the simple decency of ordinary people. And on a Texas ranch in 1945, a cowboy with a gentle heart mended wounds no diplomat could reach. Sometimes, the greatest victory isn't won on a battlefield. It's earned in the quiet grace of forgiveness.